Aloha, aloha, you magical beings. Welcome to this video. Welcome. So, today we're here in our office kitchen. And I'm just here because I did a Patreon little teaching moment on Patreon on reality and fantasy and perception as a person who is on their spiritual path, whether you're beginning in the very beginning or even looking into it, or just started and it is in the very beginning part of it, to even those who are even to the point where they've been through so many years of it. This is good for you as well. And I just kind of wanted to touch base on the whole idea of perception and the idea of being on a spiritual path and growing, because being on a spiritual path is all about that, right? It's all about growing. It's all about evolving. And one of the main things about being on a spiritual path is it's all about you, right? It's all about you and perception. Now, here's the thing. And I'm just kind of going to go, we're going to voila out, we're going to talk story. I'm going to, I'm spilling the witch's brew on this matter, okay? Because we're going to have to talk about this. Especially, while you're learning, while you're evolving, as you're growing, we never stop growing. We learn, we gain information, we get insight, we experience it. That's what this life is for. So why I wanted to share with you is because I feel that this is very important, amongst other things, but this is an important part, especially when you're in the very beginning stages of awakening and being on this path of growing. Because one of the huge things that can happen is that ego can come into your life in full force and you're not aware of it. Okay? And understanding this simple, hard, difficult truth, but yet so easy once you have understand it, once you have come to an understanding of it, can be the most life-changing part on being on a spiritual path and growing, and can be one of the greatest tools on your compass to help you navigate through your life. Now, this is what it is. Perception is gonna be one of the biggest things forever on your spiritual path. As you're learning, as you're growing, perception is going to be part of that journey. And I have three things that I want to share with you about perception that will help you on this path. Okay, remember remember how I said ego? Okay. Many of you out there that have had the awakening, had the spiritual awakening, or in the very beginning of your path, many individuals mistakenly, unconsciously allow their egos to come into play. And I'll give you an example. When someone learns something, that becomes the whole entire world. And all of a sudden, that's it for that moment in time. Yeah? And a lot of times when we are in the beginning of our growth, we're excited, we're super fantabulous, and we're wanting to soak in all this information. And we're wanting to learn however we can learn from many different sources if possible, right? Many of us fall into the category. Now, ego can step inside and come in, and when we learn something, it can get in the way by us being all like, oh, okay, I'm learning this, I'm good, let's do this now, okay, all right, I need to do this, and I'm going to do this, and nobody can tell me anything differently, okay? And this is the reason why I'm talking about perception in the very beginning of your physical journey, because it's going to be super important to calm that ego. Now, on a disclaimer, ego is good. Now, so many of us in the spiritual community have put a negative connotation onto this ego because of what social media, what the media has said, what other people in the public community have said. But there is one person that I love. Now, I've learned this through my cultural practice, but there's one person in mainstream media who I love for when they said this. They had said, we all need a little bit of ego. Okay. Now, there's a reason for that. Okay, we all need a little bit of ego to exist in this world, and it's true. We can't get rid of the ego. The ego is a part of us. The ego is part of what helps us survive. You can disagree, but until you get to that point when you learn that lesson, then you're not gonna understand until you get to that point. Okay. Now I'm sharing with you because I think that's super important. Ego, we need a little bit of ego. Ego is our instinct to survive. Ego is part of what gives us certain drives, yeah, so that we can exist here. Ego is what keeps us grounded when you really, really look at it, yeah. One of the biggest things that another famous person has said, a celebrity said, he said, always ask questions. Be your biggest skeptic, okay? And ego can play into that. Ego can definitely play into that. Okay, and so on the spiritual path, while you're looking at growing and evolving, perception is key. Now, one huge thing about the spiritual path is, number one, being open, being in awareness. Your perception of things are always going to be correct and not correct. All right. Perception is correct because you're experiencing it. That's your perception. Everybody's perception. There's so many different perceptions. Your perception is correct and it's incorrect. Okay? Understand, according to you, it might be correct, but according to someone else, it might not be correct. And that is why number one is being open or in awareness that perception is right and wrong, and understanding that it's okay to be either or, because it's all about you. Okay, the spiritual journey is all about you. Number two, be in the mindset of understanding. Okay, number one was all about being open, right? Being in awareness that your perception is going to be different from somebody else's perception, and their perception is going to be different from yours and other people's perception, right? Now, number two is understanding. Being in the awareness of understanding somebody else's perception, somebody else's viewpoint, okay? To the point where you're open to learn about that perception, okay? Because your perception might be right to you at the moment, but that doesn't mean your perception can't evolve. When it evolves, your current perception, pre-evolvement, is correct. But once it's evolved, it's not correct anymore. Yeah? A big perception of history when people thought the world was flat. Okay, yeah, I know we have a little bit of, we have some people who are flat earthers today. But let's just stick with typical history, whatever. You know, at one point in time, people thought the world was flat. Then they discovered, okay, the world is not flat. It's actually cylinder. No, we can get complicated and whatever, but let's stick with that, okay? So at one time, one perception was correct. But then when evolution and people gain more knowledge and they discovered, okay, the world isn't flat, it's actually a sphere. Then the world, that the idea that it was flat was no longer right, yeah? And that is why number two is understanding, and that's why it's important to be able to understand somebody else's perception, because you can evolve from that, okay? And number three is change. Understand that on this spiritual path, your perception of things will change. It won't always be what it is. And some of the times it will. What you learn today might be the same 20 years from now. Okay? There are other things that you will learn that will definitely change. Okay? And that is why number 3 is change. Be in the mindset of being open to the understanding, so that once you understand somebody else's perception or another perception that's not even in your reality, be open to, if that resonates with you, to change. Okay? So perception on spiritual path is one of the biggest things you can come to, just an awareness of when you're starting out, when you're beginning, and throughout your whole entire spiritual journey. I mean, even the masters and gurus are understanding this concept of perception, and even they too have perceptions change, even in their current years and years and years of experience in this physical life. Okay, so perception leads to understanding that spirit is here for you to evolve, and that your perception will always evolve, and that what was once correct isn't correct anymore. But that doesn't mean it's not correct. Okay, when you're learning spiritual things and things of spiritual nature, you're gonna come to the point where things make sense and things don't make sense. Yeah, and there's a part of what's real and what's not that coming to the awareness of it will help you so much more in your spiritual journey. So for now, go to High Witch of Hawaii Patreon, where I get more into the reality and fantasy of spiritual and physical, and how understanding that more deeply can actually open you up to so much more things on the spiritual nature. Okay, so anyhow, this is your High Witch of Hawaii, Kahu OniLuv, saying a hui ho for now, and remember, the magic is within you. Hugs and honeys. Mwah.